Good evening, USA. Good morning, Asia. I'm Chris Tang. Welcome to the Wilbur Wu Greater China Business Series. In the next 45 minutes or so, we will discuss some of the major challenges that China is facing, from the abrupt end of the zero-COVID policy to the potential beginning of the slow economic growth. Today's event is also co-sponsored by the Greater China Business Association and the Chinese Student Association at UCLA. Also, this event is sponsored by the Cathay Bank, and we thank all our supporting organizations. Before I begin, let me say a few words about Wilbur Wu. Born in Guangdong province of China in 1916, Wilbur Wu received his bachelor's degree in business administration from UCLA in 1942. Then he became the vice chairman of the Cathay Bank. Since then, he has become a major figure in Los Angeles. As a way to express his gratitude to UCLA, Wilbur and his wife Beth endowed the Wilbur Wu Greater China Speaker Series 20 years ago. Today, Wilbur's legacy lives on. His vision and his family's goal for this speaker series was, and so is, to facilitate dialogue, promote understanding, and strengthen the important ties between the Greater China and the United States. On behalf of UCLA, I thank Wilbur Wu and his family for their generous support. Now, let me begin today's session. Due to the rapid changing situation in China, I plan to do a monologue instead of having a panel discussion so that we can organize this session quickly. Because, as you know, China has been in the news quite often lately. So I hope you will bear with me for the next 45 minutes. Let me begin by asking, why should we care about China's economy? Well, besides being the second largest economy of the world, China's economy affects the world for three reasons. First, China is still the world's largest exporter, producing everything, virtually everything for the world. In 2021, China exported a total of $3 trillion, including $500 billion of goods to the United States. Second, China is also the world's largest importer. It's imported $2.5 trillion of equipment and also as commodities, such as oil, plastic, copper, etc. Third, many companies around the world rely on the Chinese markets. For multinational firms such as Apple, Tesla, Starbucks, GM, Louis Vuitton, Mercedes, even toys, Hasbro, the biggest market is in China. Now, despite the current geopolitical tension between US and China, many European countries still want to engage China. 2 weeks ago, at the Davos meeting in Switzerland, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte recognized China is a huge economy with huge potential and a huge innovation base. By the same token, French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire echoed this view by saying, I strongly believe that in the world game, China must be in, China cannot be out. Given this sentiment, how should we see China in the future? Now, therefore, China's economic growth can affect the global trade and the global economic growth, including the United States. So today, I plan to just discuss 4 questions with you. So let me share the screen with you so that we can go over these questions. So, if you look at the China economy, things are changing rapidly. It started with the draconian zero-COVID policy to the sudden end of the policy in December. Second, The growth of the economy of China was phenomenal for 4 decades until COVID hit. So in the last year, China reported there's only 3% growth. Now, by US standard, 3% is not bad, but by Chinese standard, it is really bad. Then the question, what does the future hold? Third, the population is shrinking. Last year, there have over 850 million population has declined, so that the population now is down to 1.41 billion people. Without enough people and also aging population, what will happen to the China's economy in the future? Fourth, since President Trump pushing for decoupling from China, so the US pushing for the decoupling, along with the China's narrative, things are getting more tense. So in that case, the tension between China and the United States has been pretty tense lately. And also that is then the question, what does the future hold? Now, these 4 questions are so big, so broad. It's very difficult to discuss this in a short period of time. So therefore, I've been thinking about how to address these questions. So I decided to provide a simple framework such that we can actually analyze these 4 questions in this context. So in the case, please allow me to share with you what I call the preamble. Then I can start and stop sharing the slide so that we can actually have a more interesting discussions. All right. So let me give you the preamble based on the historical perspective of China. If you look at China as a country with 5,000 years of civilization, it has come a long way in the following sense. China and India were the greatest economy in the world for pretty much 18 of the centuries before the 18th century. And then during the Qing dynasty, things got complicated, partly because the country was corrupt and also that many people were addicted to opium. So in the late Qing dynasty, China was pretty much divided up by many countries. In the north, by Russia. In the east, by Japan. In the middle somewhere, by Germany. Then in the south is France and Britain. So then the Second World War came along and then the Civil War. So things got complicated. Then China, the curtain was closed for almost 50 years. At that time, poverty was common. And then Chairman Tang decided to open up in 1978. So this was really a significant moment to change the fate of China. So at that time, basically the idea is that as long as the mice can catch, the cat can catch the mice, doesn't matter if it's white and black. Chairman Tang's mind is that we open up the economy, hopefully that people will get food to eat, get wealthy, get a better life, then let it go. So in the case, that was the starting point. Then later on, in 2001, China entered WTO under President Clinton's support. So WTO membership was a big deal because it enabled China to actually to trade more easily with other countries. Also, with the idea, the underlying promises is have a better government. And then also that hopefully that will also elevate in terms of trade on both sides. So that was, everything's good. Then you can see that the growth was really growing exponentially since 2001, since WTO. Then when the country becomes so successful, then came President Xi in 2013. Well, if you look at the Chinese economy, it became the second biggest economy in the world. So in the case, if you think back about the history, China was the largest economy in the world, but then because of the Opium War, because of other issues, Then they feel that maybe it's time for China to re-emerge as the world leading economy, the leading figure. So therefore, President Xi started the idea of China Dream. China Dream is unlike the American Dream. It's very different. Its idea is to have a new China such that it's stronger, it is stable, as harmonious, no fight, no internal fight, civilized, creative, and bountiful. There are plenty of food, plenty of things like America. So that was the idea to regain the glory of China. Then how to do that? Well, if you go back in history, since the Silk Road to China, then the idea of the One Belt, One Road initiative to actually re-establish the network on the land from all the way from China through Europe to Africa. And also by the sea, the maritime is actually in terms of trade. So that is how the One Belt, One Road go through all the countries from the east to the west. Then later on in 2020, President Xi with other countries formed the RCEP. It stands for Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So this is with 15 countries around Asia, that from Australia, New Zealand to Indonesia to Vietnam is actually established some kind of free trade agreement to trading blocks. So that came along in 2013. And then lately, it's actually come up with a common prosperity in terms of getting the income inequality, fighting poverty, and also have some kind of control of all those big tech companies. I'll come back to that later. All right. So that is starting 2013 up till 2022. Right now, by 2021, if you look at this figure, it shows that China's economy has grown 120 times. Wow, from 140 billions to 17.7 trillion US dollars. Versus United States, the GDP grew only 10 times. It's still a big number, okay? But then I think that changed the dynamics. China was really in a dire situation in the 70s until now become the second biggest economy. Now, so with this backdrop, I'm going to talk about 4 questions as a promise. First one is, what is the impact of the southern end of the zero COVID policy in December? And then I'll talk about the second question. What is the impact of the slow growth and also how it affect the future? The third one is about the impact of the shrinking and aging population in China. And the last one is about the trade war and the technology war in terms of the impact of US decoupling trend, how it's going to play out. Of course, no one knows the answer. I'm not a politician, I'm not a political scientist, but I could comment a little bit on the trade, the economic, and the supply chain. Now, how should we answer these questions? Well, I thought about this. I would like to propose a framework that I'd like to share with you. This framework is about China's regulations. What I learned from this one is based on my own observations over the few decades and also talk with many of my friends in China. The idea is that whenever things are not certain, China is, well, I don't know how to manage. Let's open it up first. Like the new economy, the platform economy, ride sharing. They said, we don't know how to manage. Let it start first rather than controlling it. Then if things are out of control, then the gates would drop. Once it dropped, they said, well, let's stop, clean house. Then we ease up. Now, this one actually happened before. If you think about it, before the Civil War, China was actually occupied by all these foreign countries from Russia, Japan, France, Germany, and Britain. Then when after the Civil War, it's all tight, the gate dropped. They basically asked all the foreigners leave. That's why you have this kind of remnants. You see that in China. Then after that, they reflect, they say, well, now we clean house. After we clean house, now we can open up, right? So that is, I'm going to use this framework to analyze these 4 questions. So it's open, tight, and ease up, all right? So just remember these 3 words, then we're good. All right, so let us talk about the first 2 questions. Why does China suddenly end the zero COVID policy? And why do you think that the slow growth, what is the impact of the future, all right? So I'm going to stop share and then answer the first 2 questions. All right, first question, sudden end of the so-called COVID policy. Before we talk about the end, how about we talk about the starting of the draconian zero COVID policy, the lockdown, the quarantine, and also the isolation ward. That is the makeshift hospital in China is called Fangchang, okay? Now, this kind of idea is not new. It has happened before during SARS. In 2003, China recognized that, hey, if you can isolate the people who are infected, then in the case you can control. Then in the case is you separate the infected versus the uninfected one. So in the case, maybe this is a good way to control the spread of the virus. And it did work in 2003. Also, it also worked during the early phase of COVID. If you go back to 2020 and 2021, China's infection rates, it was much, much lower than US, and the death, it was much, much lower than any countries in the world in terms of per capita. Then, unfortunately, this kind of draconian lockdown were problems. It will disrupt people's life, as we see that in terms of 2 months closed down, lockdown in Shanghai and other Beijing and other cities. And the economy also suffer. Then all this open, close, all the factories operation were disrupted. So as a result, Apple and the contract manufacturers, Foxconn, they said that they need to leave China and then shift some of the production to India and Vietnam. Now that is a big deal because Foxconn is one of the biggest private employer of factory workers in China. All right, so keep that in mind. Then Omicron came along in 2022 in January. Then there's a problem. In terms of spreading really easily, extremely contagious, and then they found it's very difficult to control. Even this kind of isolation and lockdown may not work. So then they stuck. Economy's going down, and also a lot of young people, there are no jobs. For the youth unemployment was around 19%. Then the government need to decide, are you going to continue the lockdown so that people have no work, maybe there's no food to eat, no place to go, or you open up? Because if you don't open up, the economy will continue to go down. So they have to make a choice. So it's a difficult choice, but then actually the press will think, oh, they opened up suddenly. That was not quite the case. There was an article by Washington Post on January 19. They interviewed some of the government officials unofficially. They said actually the central government was planning to open up gradually, ease up a little bit. But this is very cultural. In China, if you were the local government, you want to earn the credits, you earn the recognition, you also want to earn the loyalty to be more visible, to be the first one to implement what the government wants. So because everyone is rushing to open up, so it became that in terms of the entire country open up. So that's how the COVID policy just disappeared all of a sudden, right now. So this is a part of unintended plan, but whatever happened. All right. So yes, you can say that they could have done a better job in preparing, but there was unplanned. It happened. Now, then of course, a lot of scientists say, "Wow, my God! Given the spread and the efficacy of the Chinese vaccine, maybe 1 million people will die." Well, we don't have full data, but on that hand, based on my discussion with all my friends in China, yes, a lot of people were infected, but the death rate was actually similarly lower than expected. So maybe they overachieved the herd immunity. Based on the report, they claim that is around 60,000 people have passed away since early December, and also 80% of the population, they already been infected. So those who can handle the virus without severe illness, maybe they build up the immunity, maybe the situation is not as bad. So we don't know, all right? So, but the worries is still the elderly. The elderly, 25% of the elderly who are 80 or plus, many of them are not vaccinated. So in that case, let's hope that the government can convince them to take the vaccine, because vaccine is not something the government can push, just like the United States, to take it. So some of the elderly, they decide not to take the vaccine, all right? So, but now China actually also developed their own vaccine using the mRNA technology. So let's hope that this would be, they have tightened up and eased up, and let's hope for the best. That's the new variant is less lethal, such that the death rate is not as bad. All right. So that is point number one. Second question: the economy. The economy is bad. So out of the since 1978, when the Chinese economy opened up, the growth rate usually is around 8 to above 10%. Wow. Since COVID hit, except 2020, the Chinese economy, actually, the growth rate is only 3%. That's bad news. Now, there are also questions about, will China actually overtake the US GDP by 2030? I don't know, right? So basically, when they open up, the economy is tanking. Then the question, how do we see the dynamics that we observe right now? Now, for the last 40 to 40 years, the exponential growth in China, its open economy, was phenomenal. So we have observed the huge success, the unicorns, such as Alibaba, such as Tencent, the online games, and also WeChat. JD.com, like the Alibaba, Meituan, is more like in terms of Uber Eats and also Didi Uber. And also the fintech, like Ant Financials. And then, of course, last but not least, TikTok. So these are huge, huge successful ventures in terms of innovations. Now, for the world, we found that this is innovations, this new growth, fantastic. But there's a flip side of it. President Xi may think that this kind of growth, one, is only benefit certain class of people, maybe the educated class, maybe the one who educated, or also the rich is become richer. Also, they also worry about maybe people are addicted to mobile phones, addicted to online games. So that's why they said, well, this could be out of control. Then the idea is that there should be some kind of, in terms of open, maybe control. So now actually there's a control. So we observe that. So basically there were limitations of how many hours children can play online games so that they can study. Well, I'm not sure that is a bad idea. All right. Second, they also clamp down on cryptocurrencies, clamp down on P2P lending because there are a lot of scandals that involved. Then also that they also have tighter control of all these technology firms, using the idea of data securities and also privacy issues, and then also stop Didi to register new customers until recently was opened up. So then from open to close to tightly control, but then things are not going so well. So at the same time, they also try to use a state-owned enterprise. They said, well, just as the private enterprise is going so well, maybe we should let the state-owned enterprise to also take part of the piece of the pie as well. But how does it play out using the state-owned enterprise to compete with this technology firm in AI, in the commerce and deliveries? I don't know, right? But I think that at least the idea is to have a balance between private sectors and also state-owned enterprises. Now, but then because the economy was really down to 3%, and now the economy they claim is opening up. Okay, so how in Davos, the vice premier Liu He was mentioned, hey, China is open up for good. So come back and also that to do business with us and keep investing in us. Is it true? Is it really open up? Well, is it turn out not so simple? With some open to close or to tightly control, now they ease up a little bit. There is a hidden issues. As it turns out that a lot of all these technology companies, they have another owners, which is called Cyberspace Administration of China, CAC. This China's government's entity will buy some of the golden shares. They call golden shares. They will give them control, the government control, that oversees the board membership, that oversees in terms of the investments of these companies, mergers and acquisitions, and as well as the operations overseas. So therefore, in China, they open up, tightly control, and now they ease up a little bit. Now, then the question, what will be the outcome in the future? Now, let me just summarize what we cover in these two questions, all right? All right, so we give you the framework in terms of how China open, tight, and then ease up again. All right, so this is a summary of the first two questions. The first one is in terms of ending the zero COVID policy in December. At first, they have a tight lockdown, and now they ease up to save the economy. And let's hope that the new variants is less deadly, so that the number of deaths in China is not too overwhelming. In terms of the economy, it is definitely slowing down because of many factors, US decoupling, as well as a zero COVID policy. Now, also the technology. So I think that based on what I observed, the free rein period, open period is probably over. So the tight regulations is also maybe too tight because the markets, like the three stocks, Alibaba, Tencent, and Meituan, the value dropped by $2 trillion in 1 year in 2022. Then that is also not good. So now they try to ease up a little bit, but ease up by how much? Then the question is, how do you get the foreign investment? Would they come back? I don't know. So I don't have the crystal ball, but that is its current situation. Now, let me move on quickly about the last two questions, the shrinking population and aging population, as well as the US decoupling trend. All right. So I'm going to show you one chart. All right. On the left-hand side, it talks about in terms of the population. In China, they started one-child policy. At the time, China was poor. They just don't have enough food to feed everyone. But then the one-child policy has an advantage. Many children in China, because of one child, they can be supported by parents and their grandparents. So basically, there's 6 adults to support one child. So in the case, all the resources were funneled into one child. That's how they developed China. But then there's a problem. There's not enough young people. Then 2016, they actually allowed 2-child policy. But then they did not pick up. Most people, because of industrialization and as well as 60% of the women in the workforce, they just do not find it affordable to actually to have more children. So therefore, the population has shrunk. But that is not the challenge. The challenge is that the aging population. Now, as you know, the economic growth rely on the population and productivity. Now this population is shrinking, and then also that in terms of its aging. So unless you have other means to actually improve the productivity, the economic growth could be difficult. All right. So how to deal with the in terms of the population, shrinking population, right? So I have a couple of points to share. So let me stop this slide. Okay. In terms of the shrinking population, I think that is a challenge. Then the question, how should the government can generate more tax dollars to support pension, healthcare, how to grow, because if we don't have enough people, the real estate market may collapse because they don't need that many houses. Then the question is that how do you get the money? Well, in terms of money, maybe it's time for them to introduce capital gain tax. That is, to me, is an elephant in the room. That I think the rich people can afford to pay a little more tax, right? That's point number one. Point number two is that maybe they can actually can encourage people to own more real estate. But then at the same time, they also need to control the speculations. So I think that is something they can consider. Then the other one is stimulates foreign, maybe in terms of immigration, like Canada, to get some people to come to China to work and stay. So I think that could be something to consider to supplement the population shrinking. Now, but in China, there's still two pools of population they can draw upon. The first one are the workers in the rural area. I think that in the rural area, they don't necessarily need to work in the urban area if you can actually change the nature of work using technology. Second one is also a lot of state-owned enterprises. They can actually mobilize them to work in this kind of economy. And last but not least, China is actually leading very advanced development in automation, robotics, AI to boost the labor productivity. So therefore, I still think that is actually the shrinking population aging is not the end. I think that the Chinese government and the Chinese people can actually turn it around and by implementing some new policies. In terms of automation, China has been phenomenal. Let me give you one example. 2018, JD.com, the second largest e-commerce in China, introduced a people-less warehouse operations in Shanghai. All right. So basically, the entire warehouse from end to end, there's no people in the warehouse. They can actually do the sorting, shipping, everything, loading onto the truck without people. That is phenomenal. So that is something we need to keep in mind. All right. In real time, I'm going to share the screen to show you the last question. All right. Okay. This is related to the trade war. So we know that is 2017, U.S. withdrew from the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then 2018, the trade war started in terms of imposing tariffs, and also that's in terms of try to find ways to get decoupled from China. And then the President Biden continue to widening these decoupling activities, including technology, the chip manufacturing, technology, whatnot. Now, but then in 2020, as I mentioned, China also, because there's a vacuum, because US was not doing the TPP, then China says, well, maybe we can form a trading bloc with the regional comprehensive economic partnership with 15 countries, such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Korea, and whatnot. Then, as you can see this chart, the trade with ASEAN really went up a lot. So that is actually from 2018 to 2022, it went up 70-80%. Yes, it's indeed true. The trade between US and EU has gone down by a few percent. Trade with US went down by close to 20% in December 2022, and also with EU fell by 18%. Now, but you look at this chart, it's quite interesting. Yes, this is indeed going down, but this is going up. Now, then the question is what is happening? Is really the ASEAN countries truly import that much stuff from China? They did. But what are those stuff? What are those things? Well, on the surface, it seems that China is only doing business with ASEAN. Actually, beneath the surface, it's not that simple. What happened was the ASEAN country import the parts and the components. So in that case, they do the final assembly, and then we ship it to the EU and US. Because instead of shipping the product directly from China to US because of trade war, the tariffs around 25%. If they can ship many of the components, like solar panels, some of the components, some of the parts, and do the final assembly in Vietnam or Indonesia, and then do the final assembly, then they can change the country of origin from make in China to make in Vietnam. Then from make in Vietnam, then they can reship it to the United States, then they can actually reduce the tariffs. So therefore, it's actually China does not trade, the trade between China and US is declining directly, but indirectly, the trade is still going through China to ASEAN back to the US. So therefore, it's the situation is also not that simple, all right? Now, then one may ask, hey, can actually US decouple completely from China? Well, I would argue that at least not in the foreseeable future. Here's why. In the US, now we're pushing for clean energy, solar panel. Well, who's the biggest producer of solar panel? China. Right now, you don't want to buy from China, and it's okay, we'll buy from Vietnam. Where does Vietnam get the parts? China. So therefore, right now, President Biden recognized that. Then they say, actually, they're not going to investigate where is the country of origin of this solar panel, at least for 2 years. So in that case, it's not happening. Second, electric vehicles. We want to shift to the clean energy, the clean economy. We need more electrical vehicles. Well, you may be able to build the electric car where you get the batteries. Most of the EV batteries rely on lithium batteries that require lithium and cobalt. Well, the refinery of the lithium, most of them are in China. 60% of the EV batteries they're produced in China. US has a very small production. Yes, you can grow, but it will take time. And also bear in mind, our EPA does not let companies set up factories that easily in the United States. So therefore, in the short term, it's not that simple to decouple from China. And also, is it really advantageous for US to decouple from China? Well, we can discuss it later on. So let me wrap up in terms of what I see for the next one, then open up for discussion. All right. So to wrap up, the sudden lockdown is, well, the things were no choice, but they tighten it, they ease up, they save the economy, hope for the best. Economy, they open up period, probably is over. Okay. They tighten up, also did not work, and now they ease up. And let's hope that they will get the foreign investors coming in to regain the investment control. Aging population definitely is a problem, but I think the automation and AI can help. Last one, the decoupling trend. It is very tense, but this tightening is done by US, not done by China. China is willing to trade with US. And US want to become less dependent on China. But directly, they are, but indirectly, they still rely on China because we talk about the change of origin. But then this is even worse because it makes the supply chain even more complicated, not to mention about carbon emissions because you ship things into more ports, right? Then the question, will US ease up? I don't know. So that would be the question. Now, after all this, then the question is, wow, all this fighting going on, is there anyone winning? Well, there are winners. Let me share with you my final thought. Are there any winners? Yes. The ASEAN country, they are happy. They are joining the RCEP and they have more free import with China. Mexico is also benefiting from this trade war because now they can take advantage of the USMCA trade agreement. So Mexico is importing a lot of parts to make the home appliances in Tijuana, just south of the border in California, and also in terms of the even Mattel toys in Mexico. So, but some of the part is still from China. They add some of the added activities, and then we ship it back to the United States, then try to take advantage of free trade agreements. If you look at the economic growth of these few countries, they are phenomenal, right? They're bigger than US, right? Second, what are the consequences? So the supply chain is become more complex. Now there are a lot of regional trading blocks that I've written about it. And then my concern is that is quite often in the past, we've seen it. The trade war sometimes can escalate into a hot war. So I hope that this will not be the case because I think declaring a war is easy. Keeping the peace is hard. So I think that hopefully that both countries can actually sit down and talk and try to figure how to work it out. To some other areas, it could be competing with each other, and some area may be to cooperate. So for example, they can cooperate fight climate change. This affecting the world has nothing to do with which country you're in. Income inequality, the war on poverty, every single country has the same issues. Pandemic, the healthcare issues we need to address. This is not a local problem, but a global problems. And then also that, yes, fine, you can compete on high-tech competitions. I welcome that because actually that will create more innovations. So actually will benefit the world. All right, in real time, I'm going to stop here and take some questions. All right, so I'm going to stop share. Okay, so now I have questions. The question is from Austin. Do you think AI will be enough to make up for the loss in productivity due to shrinking and aging population? We're going to get worse before it gets better. All right. So AI is phenomenal. Look at ChatGPT. Now, my slides, my thought is not generated from ChatGPT because they need to information at least up to 1 year ago, right? So I can declare that. So in terms of can it make up the loss in productivity? I do not know to what extent, but it helps in terms of improved productivity. For example, in China, now they have robots. They have robots to actually do delivery of meals in some of the nursing homes that reduce the need for humans. And also they have a robot to have a discussions with the elderly in nursing homes. All right. So basically they can tell them stories. They can actually have conversations with human. So the AI is already there. All right. So in that case, will reduce the need. Now, AI also, we know that will help out in terms of healthcare, in terms of diagnostic check, in terms of alerts. So now some of the hospitals that start using in terms of AI to monitor the patients and then try to alert the nurse whenever there's a need. So in the case, I do see that AI automation can improve the productivity, no doubts about that. But to what extent, I do not know. But I think that that's too early to tell. All right. So that's my answer. Thank you. Next question. Do you see foreign relations get worse or better between US and China? This is a big question. Right now, I think that things are tense. But I think I hope both countries will change the thinking process. Because right now, both countries, one, they're pointing fingers. Second, there's no trust. Whenever there's no trust, you cannot talk. I think both sides is okay. Let's take a step back. Let's cool it. Let's look at the good things this partnership has created. All right. Let's think about it. Yes, US, the narrative is that, oh, China is stealing all the jobs from the United States. Well, depending how you look at it. I was working at the IBM factories and the HP factories, but then at the time, it was US. It's US company's decision. At that time, our VP was saying that, okay, whenever you want to produce anything, we need to do the analysis. Is it cheaper to do in-house or cheaper to do elsewhere? If it's cheaper elsewhere, go. Well, of course, it goes because US cannot compete in terms of cost, compete with China, Mexico, and all this. So bit by bit, everything is gone, right? Now, but China never actually forced any companies to outsource to China. So this is maybe is a hidden agenda that's never been discussed. The US corporations benefit tremendously from this partnership. If you look at many companies, they shift the jobs to China, the cost went down, right? But did they lower the price? No. So therefore, the profitability went up. So you look at in terms of the corporations, the benefit they get from this is phenomenal. Now, consumers also benefit from that, from this trade agreement. If you look at the computers, you look at the cars we produce, the cars we drive in America, most of them make in Mexico. They provide a lot of benefits. So I think that this kind of thing, they have to think about the good things. Then you can say, oh, there's certain issues. Let us see how we can resolve. Now, that is a better way to have a dialogue. Instead of saying, oh, you're bad, you're already stealing the job from me. That is not the way to start a conversation. So that depends on how US approach the subject. And also China also need to take a step back in terms of how to move forward with the world, because China cannot afford to close again, because we see what happened, right? So I think all the countries need to learn how to work and live to work with each other. Our biggest problem is not about this. Our biggest problem is about the environmental, the climate change. Let's work together. Hopefully our world will last longer. All right, thank you. All right, next one. Do you see US strengthening foreign relationship with other Asian countries and moving more manufacturing out to China, to Vietnam? Good questions. Now, I mentioned about in terms of China, they formed the RCEP partnership with all the ASEAN countries. So in that case, improving the trading among this country, then Vietnam benefit a lot. Now, Biden administration, they decided not to join the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Instead, they formed a different trading bloc in 2022. This is called the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. It was started in May. Now, but what is interesting is that they have 40 members, and the RCEP has 50 members. But you look at the intersections, they both join both groups. If you look at Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, they say, look, these countries, they want both countries. They need to import the part from China and produce it, then they have create jobs and ship it to the United States, right? So as I said, that yes, sure, now Apple is shifting a bit by bit to Vietnam and India, but the amount is still quite small. The bulk of the product are still made in China. But the public think, oh my God, they're shifting everything, is not true. You look at it in terms of trade volume, the percentage of drop is still very small, because in the foreseeable future, there's no other country can produce things as quickly in terms of scale and scope, in terms of capability of China. So that is not going to happen, at least within the next few years. Yes, US now is going to partner with India. Now, if you've been to India, the infrastructure compared to China, no comparisons. All right. So in terms of logistics, shipping, and all these things, they are not quite there yet. So it may change over time, but it will take time. It's not right away. So therefore, I see that there will be a shift a little bit from less dependent from China directly, but indirectly, US is still depending on China. All right. So next one. Next question is anonymous. Do you see an export of talent leaving China for work to other countries? Okay. So this one is tricky questions, because I think that is actually is interesting. A lot of Chinese scientists, engineers, I wrote in LA Times, actually they left US and returned to China. These are US trained scientists and professionals. Why? Because since President Trump's era, they were concerned about espionage and spying in the US. So there are few cases that were indeed they was stealing company secrets for China, but the bulk of them they're not. But then there's under suspicions. So some of the scientists, they feel uncomfortable. Some actually return to China. Now, in terms of China, the talent pool is phenomenal. If you look at the world in terms of percentage of scientists, in terms of students, in terms of China, India dominates the world in terms of scientists, in terms of percentage points. Also, in terms of patents and papers, in terms of published by the Chinese scientists, is getting close to the United States, if not more. Now, this is the former Secretary of Treasury, Hank Paulson, just wrote a piece, Foreign Affairs, last week. He said, hey, China, the way we deal with China in the US is not going the right way, because China, the economy is huge, and China's scientists is also huge and also learning very fast. The Chinese universities is doing extremely well. So therefore, yes, right now, by doing the technology war, stopping all this semiconductor technology being exported to China, stopping US citizens from working from the semiconductor company in China, it will slow down the economy, development of the 5G technology in China. But I can guarantee you it's a matter of time. Chinese scientists will come up with the technology to do this nano chips. How long would it take? I do not know. But I can tell you, if there's a will, there's a way. That is a Chinese way. They will catch up. Next one is Cho Ming. Cho Ming is our dear alumni. Cho Ming's question is that there has been an erosion of trust by nations against the United States as a result of bipartisan China bashing. Do you think it is important for US to rethink? Absolutely, Cho Ming, I fully agree with you. All right. Now, in terms of trust, it takes time to earn and like respect. So I think that depending on the mindset, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, China was the leading economy of the world. And they look at US, it's a young country, only 300 years old. So therefore, in terms of US trying to isolate from China, it may not be a wise move in the following sense. Look at all the ASEAN countries. ASEAN countries, right now, their trade with China went up significantly. The total trade is bigger than they trade with US. So all these ASEAN countries, they are not going to choose side. That's why they joined both RCEP as well the Indo-Partnership Economic Framework. They want to capture both worlds. If you want to choose side, it's not clear who is going to win this time. Because right now, US is pushing all these countries to pick a side. But I can tell you, these countries are not comfortable to choose a side. And you force them, things could get complicated. All right. So I hope that United States will need to rethink. Now, this idea is actually many people suggested that included Hank Paulson as well as Henry Kissinger, because I think the better idea is to work with China, but then also try to work out a way so that you can coexist and co-develop, and everybody can actually live peacefully. Then that it takes leadership. I think that I hope that United States will rethink about how they engage China. All right. So in real time, I have one last questions. All right. So let me take this one. This is the question. I like that. Is, do you think more US companies are going to bring production back to the United States or to Mexico or use ASEAN countries? All right. Yes, I would say so. But I think that bringing the job back to the United States to production, the number of job creations will be very small. For example, the CHIPS Act, $52 billion, fantastic. But if you visit the fabrication facilities, you'll notice that there are not that many workers because it's automation, right? So therefore, there are not that many jobs. Now, in the United States, they try other kind of products like the mask. It was not cost competitive. It's very difficult. Now, Mexico stands a much better chance because it's much closer to the United States, and also they have a free trade agreement. So right now, we see that there is a big shift in terms of the Mexico development. Now, but Mexico, it has its own problem because the presidents just nationalized the energy. So a lot of people are not happy with that. So in that case, the question is that how to actually work with the Mexican government such that the United States can actually work closely with Mexico to develop a more regional supply chain. Now, ASEAN countries, definitely, we're seeing it happening in terms of Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and hopefully India, that would be actually develop the economy as well. So I think that is a good move. But I think that in terms of China, I think that my assessment is that China is not going away. So basically, the power of the market power of China and also China's manufacturing capabilities cannot be underestimated, at least in a short period of time. All right. So I think that is all I have. I know that I ran a bit over time because the question coming in, I cannot really let it go. So on this note, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to really share your thoughts, and so that give me the opportunity to share what I've learned and also for my writing. So on this note, I want to thank all of you for the privilege of your time. Thank you.